Thank you all for being here on what is a beautiful, balmy Trump Tuesdays. Thank you all for joining us in snow and in sunshine. Ambassador Cook, why don't you come up this way? Hi, Gregory. So, Ambassador, why don't you come over here? I am thrilled that we were able to have Ambassador Goodwin Cook join us today to talk about the issue of foreign policy in general and Russia in particular. We are thrilled a man of his background would come out and join us outside to talk about this important issue, and candidly, one that sometimes is hard for us to draw the line about how it impacts our life. So we're going to hear from Ambassador Goodwin Cook, and then we're going to hear from Gregory Lisnichi. How did I do?
Pretty good.
Thank you. Who is a member of the Ukrainian Congress Committee, the Syracuse branch, where he advocates for the needs of the Ukrainian American community, and he is very active in the Ukrainian community. So let me turn the mic over to Ambassador Cook, and let me just give you a couple of details. Goodwin Cook served as the Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary, I've always wanted to say that word, Plenipotentiary of the United States to the Central African Republic from 1978 to 1980, a time of great upheaval in the nation when it transitioned from the Central African Empire to the present-day CAR. Ambassador Cook was a career Foreign Service Officer of the United States Department of State. Cook earned his bachelor's degree from Harvard and was commissioned as a second lieutenant in the U.S. Marine Corps that same year. He served as an engineering officer and a battalion adjunct with an overseas posting to Okinawa, Japan. He began his career with the U.S. State Department in 1956, serving as a Foreign Service Officer until 1981, with postings to Pakistan, Yugoslavia, Italy, Belgium, Canada, and the Côte d'Ivoire. He has been affiliated with the Maxwell School of Citizenship and Public Affairs since 1980. So please, Ambassador Cook.
Thank you.
I can move this if that's easier.
Okay. I'll lean on this.
Okay,
I think it's good. If I fall down, it'd be very embarrassing.
I'll catch you.
I'm very glad to be here, but I have to say I think it's colder than Christian charity. I can't imagine what we're all doing here. Also, Mayor Miner, I am a great admirer of Mayor Miner. That's hard to say. And I was asked to talk about Donald Trump and asked to talk about Putin and Russia. All of those things are very hard to understand. I don't understand Donald Trump, I don't understand Russia, and I don't understand Putin. So to try to make sense out of the whole thing in just a few minutes is a demanding problem. Anyway, let me first say that although I think Vladimir Putin is a thug, and he is a thug, nevertheless, he has a cause. To a certain extent, the United States, I believe, is responsible for the problems we're having with Russia. Looking back to the end of the Cold War ended, the Russians moved out of Germany, Germany was reunited, they moved all their soldiers out of the Baltics, out of Poland, Czechoslovakia, Hungary, and so forth. All the soldiers went home. So there we were. What did we do? What was our reaction? We moved NATO 1,000 miles closer to Moscow. NATO was at the edge of Germany, then bang, we put it to the eastern edge of Poland. That meant that the Russians were looking out and seeing NATO soldiers all around their western streams down in the south. There were NATO soldiers in Ukraine. No, not Ukraine, but there were NATO soldiers in Turkey. They were just about surrounded. And they said, what are you doing? Why are you doing this to us? We didn't answer, but the reason was because we can. We're strong, you're not. And they still resent it. And Putin still resents it. However, that was all very well until we came to Ukraine. Ukraine is a fascinating country. Syracuse has a large Ukrainian population, so that you probably know about it as much or more about it than I do. But they are divided. Many Ukrainians feel an allegiance to Russia. The first Russians were in Ukraine. Kiev and Rus, the Russians in Kiev were the first real Russians. And Russians feel very at home. They feel that they are part and parcel of Ukraine. And of course, they've relied on Ukraine as a breadbasket forever. So that Russians feel close to Ukraine. Some Ukrainians feel close to Russia. However, many Ukrainians, particularly in the West, feel close to Europe. Because the way that Poland was partitioned back in the 18th century, they were not dealing with Russia, they were dealing with Lithuania, they were dealing with Poland, they were dealing with European countries, so that they feel European. And 5 years ago, the European Union offered Ukraine an opportunity to get closer economic ties. And the Ukrainians liked the idea. They thought it was a good one, probably was a good idea. But the prime minister of Ukraine, who came from the east and was very close to Russia, vetoed the idea. And you'll all recall that there was a coup. The people rose up, Ukrainians rose up in the Maidan outside the capital in Kiev. And after some fighting and so forth, the prime minister ran away to Moscow, and another new government took over. That doesn't make it a legal government. It was elected, but it was taken by a coup. I should say, unfortunately, that Ukraine, like almost all the other formerly Soviet republics, has had a very corrupt government since it was freed. We cannot say that it's a great democratic and lovely government. It's just better than the Russians. But however, they have a right to their own government, and we supported this. The Russians didn't like the idea much. They're already worried about Ukraine, about NATO in Czechoslovakia and Hungary, Poland. Now, what's going to happen to Ukraine? And we said that we wanted to bring Ukraine into NATO and turn it into another military ally of the United States. The Russians didn't like that. I'm sorry. I mean, I think NATO is pretty. I was with NATO when I was in Belgium, so I know NATO well, and I don't think NATO is a particularly aggressive body. But on the other hand, the Soviets don't know that. The Russians don't know that. So they're very unhappy and started behaving very badly. They supported an uprising in eastern Ukraine. So there's a war still going on in the Donbass region down in the southeast. They have provoked upheavals elsewhere. They're sort of threatening in the Balkans and the Baltic countries. Estonia, which is a tiny country, has a very large Russian minority. In fact, it may be a majority, I don't know. But there are a lot of Russians in the Baltic countries, and the Russians are saying, those are Russians there, we should be careful and look after them, sounding rather like Hitler talking about Czechoslovakia before the Second World War. But they do feel that. So that they have a case. We cannot say simply as Putin thuggery, that there must be ways to deal with this better. How can we do that? And what on earth is going on now? There have been rumors since the election, the end of the election, that during the campaign, American people close to Trump were in Russia working on various deals, talking to each other. That's the problem. I hate the Russians, therefore they're bad. All Russians are bad. Putin's bad, they're all bad. That's not a good foreign policy. Actually, I know some very nice Russians. I know some very nice Ukrainians. But the point is that we must not do this by saying, well, we're going to get NATO and get you. We also said that we wanted to bring NATO to Georgia, down in the eastern end of the Black Sea, which is a very corrupt little place. And they tried to move north into Ossetia, which the Russians felt was their area, and the Russians came back and pushed them back to the Tbilisi. Oh God, and we're going to have a NATO. That worries them. I mean, even though they're stinkers, it worries them. And we're not trying to make them love us, we just don't want to have a war with them. And we'd like not to go through all this trouble. I mean, I think if we could find ways to work together, it would be a very helpful and useful thing. Syria. Syria is a hideous mess. How to get out of it, I don't know. But one thing to note is that the Russians proved very helpful in Syria. When we didn't know what to do about Syrian weaponry, gas, the Russians said, we'll take care of it for you. We'll gather all the gas together and turn it over and we'll get rid of it, which they did. So the cooperation with the Russians could be extremely helpful. But we've got to do it in a sensible way and not to say, we're going to do it to you because we're NATO and we're big, you're not. That doesn't work. It works with some of them. Putin is, although a thug, he's a pretty tough thug. So that I think there's ways we can talk to them. There have been talks. This has just appeared in the papers in the last 2 or 3 days, that people, not part of the American government, but part of the Trump organization, have been going to Russia to talk about ways to solve this problem. Mr. Cohen, his name is, I forget his first name, Cohen, Michael Cohen, is Trump's personal lawyer. He's been working on this. An odd man named Sater, who is of Russian descent but of sort of criminal origins, has been working on this. He's a partner of Trump in building in the United States. And a Ukrainian member of parliament, friendly to Russia, unfriendly to the government of Ukraine, has been working with them. And that means that they have talked to the Russians to try to come up with a deal. I hate the word since Trump's in office. I mean, everything's a deal. That they can find a way to work this out. I don't think that you should do diplomacy by sending the president's business partner, or his son, or his daughter, or his lawyer. I think you should do it through the State Department and proper channels. It makes much more sense. But even we have used some very odd envoys someplace. How do you talk to North Korea? We don't have relations with North Korea. We don't have an embassy in North Korea. We sent a private citizen, like the governor of New Mexico, who went and talked to whichever Kim is in charge of North Korea, and came to some kind of resolution. It's called second layer diplomacy. You don't send a diplomat. You send a person who, with your blessing, but he's not entitled to do anything. Just go talk to them. And if we can talk to them, then maybe we can go someplace. But we cannot do it simply by yelling at them or by saying that they're thugs, although they are. You do it by talking to them. I think this can be worked out. It's too bad that we've gone so far as to actually come up with the deal. What the deal was that Putin would be allowed to rent the places that he's taken in Ukraine and Crimea and have them for X years, and then we talk about it some more. Well, that's sort of weird, but at least that's something. It's better than shooting each other. And so it might be possible. I don't think it's a good idea to do it totally secretly. I don't think it's a good idea to rely on a dubious Ukrainian member of parliament or a fairly dubious lawyer or somebody who's almost as thuggish as perhaps as the Russians. But there are ways to do it, and I think we should work on it. Sure.
How about the Russians meddling in our elections? I mean, it seems to me that there has to be some price paid for that. Also, the Russians just went into, what was it, their last?
The business about the hacking and getting into the Hillary Clinton Republican.
I don't know what else they were doing with the Trump.
No, we don't. No, we don't know anything. I
So
mean,
I'm saying that, okay, I agree diplomacy is always the best way to go, but to just, forget about what they did during the elections and say, okay, let's.
well, I believe that there are sanctions laid on now
Right.
over the
And
election.
I also believe that they should probably stay unless Russia comes up with something for us.
Well, okay. I think we should probably talk to the Russians,
Yeah,
and I think we should talk to them privately, at a high level. I think the Secretary of State sounds like a pretty good guy. The Secretary of State Tillerson, although he's tremendously rich, like all the rest of them. My God.
And we can't forget what they're subsidizing Marine Le Pen's efforts, political efforts in France. I mean, they're digging into all these countries. They tried to overthrow, was it Montenegro?
Well, there has been an attempted coup in Montenegro. Yes, he's troublesome. He's making trouble. We need to talk to the Russians much more than we have been.
I'm just afraid that Trump is going to give away the baby in the bathwater, too.
Well, I don't think he's going to do that. And I don't think he should be the person talking to Putin. I think the Secretary of State should be talking to Putin. He knows him, and I think he should be able to talk to him seriously. And Putin might understand some of it. As for the hacking into our elections, it's just crazy. And it's really strange to me. I can't make my cell phone work, so I don't know how. I don't know how to hack. I don't know how anything. But we ought to be good enough to prevent that. Yeah.
Well, if Trump declines to take the advice of the State Department and chooses to take Bannon's advice instead, then what do we do?
Well, that's a question you'll have to answer when we get to it. On the other
Are
hand,
we already there? We're there.
no, I don't think we're there yet. We've only, it's hard to believe, but Trump's only been in office about a month.
He's already done a lot of damage.
Well, he's done plenty, and will undoubtedly do more. But we're talking about Russia. I mean, immigration. If you talk about that, there I really get angry. But Americans are scared of aliens at this point. There's a feeling of fear. I don't understand it. I used to be a visa officer when I was a very junior officer. I've issued hundreds of visas. I've vetted people. I've vetted refugees. As far as I know, none of them turned into terrorists. So I know something about this, and I think that can be done. But I think that the fear-mongering about these Mexicans who are coming in to rape us is just asinine and very, very irritating. Ridiculous. Yeah. That I won't go with you. And several other things. I think abolishing our health care, we'll see what we do next year, but after we get rid of this terrible bill, we'll do something else. We don't know what it is. It's just crazy. I think our government's behaving very badly for us. But in foreign policy, you do it right or you don't do it at all, and I think it's to be done by thoughtful, careful talking, privately, tell them what we want, tell them our problems, and we can be tough. I mean, I've done international negotiations.
I think the fear is that Trump is not releasing his tax returns, and the fear is that he's got interests and potential interests in Russia that are going to color what is done. That is the fear.
Well, if he gets a big hotel in Russia, I hope the roof leaks.
Well, he just got a permit in China. He
What?
just got a permit in China after a series of phone calls.
Well, if he wants to build, well, I think as president, he's not supposed to build hotels in China. Of course, his daughter might, yeah.
I understand. I don't understand all the details. There's something about oil coming through Ukraine, going to Russia. Something about it.
Well,
You know
yeah.
what I'm talking about?
Well, Ukraine gets its oil mostly from Russia, or in pipes that come through Russia, come from the Caspian Sea. And Ukraine, the Russians can't cut off the oil to Ukraine, and have done so. On occasion, they've said, we're raising the price. It's a bad thing to have your economy depend too heavily on the Russians, unless you get somebody better to boot it. So there have been times when the Russians have cut the oil off, or threatened to cut the oil off, and the Ukrainians have backed down. And that's, I don't know what to do about it. However, we could give them some oil. We,
Excuse me, I think the reference that the woman is making is that there's a deal, to use that word, that hasn't been able to be completed because of the sanctions that are in place, and they're not able to take the oil out of Ukraine. It's a very lucrative deal, and that somehow there is some thought that Mr. Trump has something to do with that. And in light of, there's no transparency as to where his holdings are, his interests, his intentions are, as would be seen through his taxes, that we're concerned. I think that's what you're talking
That's what
about.
I'm talking about.
If
It's
I
oil
take that
that's gonna
further, it's not sending oil into Ukraine, it's getting oil out of Ukraine, and that infrastructure's in place, but they're not able to remove it. And there's a suspicion that Mr. Trump is in on this deal because he does so love the deal.
well, there may be so many, everything's suspicious about Mr. Trump.
Thank you. And Tilden, it's very suspicious. So, while we may think that it's good to think about that world of the future where we can, in fact, live as one and have reasonable relations with countries around the world, we're very concerned as we stand here today with Mr. Trump's ability to move that agenda forward. We're very concerned about his ability to lead. We're concerned about his reading level and his speaking level and whether or not he would even sit at the table with someone like Putin and be articulate enough and nuanced enough and knowledgeable enough to carry that agenda forward.
Well, I think that's why we have a Secretary of State.
Yes.
I think that's why we have diplomats.
I don't even like the Secretary of State, with due respect. I think that was a bad choice. So we have this person who admittedly doesn't like to read and is a reading teacher,
Well-
doesn't want to front it, and he's picking people to go do these very sophisticated.
One area in which our Secretary of State might be good is negotiating oil deals to make sure that Ukraine gets some oil from Russia. He knows all about oil, he knows all about Russia. He's a technician, he can do that very well.
Great, I'm not sure that matters.
I'm not sure that he will, and I'm not sure that Trump will tell him.
We'll have great conversation.
I can't trust what Trump says. It's so incongruent with what he does. And so as a citizen, no matter what we hear, I can't trust the man any more than I can trust the people. And
Well-
that's the biggest.
What can I say?
We can't give him the slack.
I don't know. I think we've got to keep our voices loud and keep saying that this is bad. I think a lot of people who were previously wild about Trump were saying, this quarter was he doing this for? What he sounds so crazy. What's going on? I agree with that. I'm very worried. I wake up scared every morning. On the other hand, he is the president, and we've got to live with it.
And the Secretary of State reports to him, does his bidding. So I don't know if I can.
Well, I don't know. I think there have been people who were smarter than their secretaries of state, and there have been secretaries of state who have been smarter than the president. And if the Secretary of State does it right, he can get the president to do what he wants to do. That's all I got.
So I want to thank Ambassador Cook. There's a seat here if you'd like to have it. I want to thank him for sharing his professional experience, and now you can understand why I felt so fortunate to have him here with us to speak on this, and why it's so important. And I would also say to your questions and answers that we had here, and in particular to those who are watching on Facebook Live or watching with the media, that we have 3 equal branches of government. And we need to have this discussion with our legislative branch as well, because there are clearly people who have issues, they have questions, they want answers. There needs to be a discussion about this at all sorts of levels, not just at parks on Tuesdays, but at organized town halls. So I want to invite Gregory to come up and to speak from his experience as a Ukrainian American and his experience of being active in the Ukrainian Congress and what it means to have a foreign policy that is thoughtful, deliberative, and transparent. Thank you for coming.
Thank you. I think from the Syracuse Ukrainian community, Ukrainians throughout this country, Ukrainians in the world have always been facing Russia and Russian aggression, most notably Putin's aggression here, for centuries. And you know, the history goes back a long way, but I think most recently we can look back look at what Putin has been doing in Putin's Russia to Ukraine and other countries throughout the world. Most recently, 3 years ago, and as we commemorated actually yesterday, over 100 Ukrainians died on a square, just like today, called the Revolution of Dignity, just because they stood out for democracy, for peace. And that's what Ukrainians did. Millions of Ukrainians came to the squares. They came under heavy government and Russian aggression in terms of just morally and for years, but they came out to the streets for peace. They came out for democracy. They came out for dignity. It was the Revolution of Dignity. And just yesterday, we commemorated the over 100 lives who died because of that, because it was Putin's orders. It was the Russian government that was against what was going on in Ukraine, and it's still what the Russian people are doing. Putin's Russia is doing against Ukraine. He has this total disregard for Ukraine that's going to be independent, that's going to be pro-Europe, that's going to be democratic, that is trying to emerge from being demoralized through the Soviet Union. That strong and independent Ukraine is a threat to Putin and is a threat to Putin's power. Putin ignores any international treaties. He ignores the Budapest Memorandum, where he just stole Crimea from Ukraine and disregards any borders. This is a man, this is the country that he represents that is totally against what this country, what this great country represents. And the Syracuse Ukrainian community, I think, has an issue with that just because of our history going way back. And here, not only in our community, but communities all over this country, is we've raised thousands of dollars. We've got thousands of pounds of humanitarian aid because of Putin's Russian war against Ukraine. We as a community have united ourselves, not only just Ukrainians, but all of us here in Syracuse. Many of us have been helping us to help that aid for Ukraine. Over 1 million children have been displaced because of this war. 10,000 people have lost their lives because of Putin's war against Ukraine on this. Those are the numbers. Those are the facts. They can't be just numbers. Those are human lives that have been affected because of this. So I think here we have the great confidence. We try to stand that this great country, what this great country can do, we hope that we can unite here, but also across the world, and stand against people who are against peace, who are against democracy, and unite against that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all very much. And we're going to let the media talk to our guests. I want to thank you all for being here. Please help yourself to some coffee, even though it is strangely warm for Syracuse in February. Thank you again for being here.
You mean the enemy of the people is here?